Hey all, Rick Howard here. Check out the new season of CSO Perspectives Public, where we bring you free encore episodes of my Premium Pro podcast. If you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe to CyberWire Pro to hear the latest episodes. It's just $10 a month or $99 for an annual subscription. A small price to pay to make sure you stay aware of everything going on in cybersecurity. Plus, it's ad-free. That means no commercials. And you know me, I hate commercials. Visit thecyberwire.com/pro to subscribe. That's thecyberwire.com/pro.
This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by SpyCloud. Stolen data circulating on the criminal underground is fuel for data breaches, account takeover, ransomware attacks, and online fraud. Your biggest security risk might be a breach or malware infection outside of your control that leaks the data of your users. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, powering solutions that proactively protect over 2 billion employees and consumers worldwide. Learn how to make recaptured data your best defense at spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire.
Iranian APT data extraction tool described. LockBit gang comes under DDoS. Twitter whistleblower security claims made public. Poland and Ukraine conclude cybersecurity agreement. Greek national natural gas supplier under criminal cyber attack. Update to the joint alert on Zimbra exploitation. Addition to CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. Johannes Ulrich from SANS on control plane versus data plane vulnerabilities. Our guest is David Nasabor, Platform Solutions Lead for UL, to discuss Safe Cyber Phase 2. And targeting and trolling with an excursus on Speedos. Really? From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Trey Hester, filling in for Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022. Google's Threat Analysis Group this morning published the results of its investigation into Charming Kitten. The Iranian government-sponsored threat group has been observed using a new extraction tool the researchers call Hyperscape. It's used to extract user data from Gmail, Yahoo, and Microsoft Outlook accounts. Google explains, quote, "The attacker runs Hyperscape on their own machine to download victims' inboxes using previously acquired credentials. We've seen it deployed against fewer than 24 accounts located in Iran. The oldest known sample is from 2020, and the tool is still under active development. We have taken actions to resecure these accounts and have notified the victims through our government-backed attacker warnings." End quote. The tool depends on having the victim's credentials. Hyperscape requires the victim's account credentials to run using a valid authenticated user session the attacker has hijacked or credentials the attacker has already acquired. It spoofs the user agent to look like an outdated browser, which enables the basic HTML view in Gmail. Once logged in, the tool changes the account's language settings to English and iterates through the contents of the mailbox, individually downloading emails as .eml files and marking them as unread. After the program has finished downloading the inbox, it reverts the language back to its original setting and deletes any security emails from Google. Earlier versions contain the option to request the data from Google Takeout, a feature which allows users to export their data to a downloadable archive file. End quote. The report includes, as is customary, a set of indicators that Hyperscape users can check as they defend their systems. Researchers at Cisco Talos tweeted over the weekend that the blog operated by the LockBit gang had come under a heavy distributed denial of service attack. Researcher Azim Shukui stated, quote, "Someone is DDoSing the LockBit blog hard right now. I asked LockBit Sup about it, and they claim they are getting 400 requests a second from over 1,000 servers. As of this writing, the attack appears to be active. LockBit promised more resources and to drain the DDoSers' money," end quote, and added in the thread that the Alf V gang seemed to be undergoing a similar attack. According to the Register, LockBit, a Russian criminal operation, said that it came under an attack because it had, in its own turn, hit the large U.S. authentication firm Entrust with ransomware earlier this summer. BleepingComputer reports that LockBit is blaming Entrust for the DDoS attack. Quote, DDoS attack began immediately after the publication of data and negotiations. Of course it was them. Who else needs it? In addition, in the logs, there is an inscription demanding the removal of their data. End quote. LockBit Sup, the public face of the gang, told BleepingComputer. But it's unclear who's behind the DDoS attack. Entrust hadn't yet responded to BleepingComputer at the time they published, and it's entirely possible a rival gang, for example, could be behind the attack. Peter Mudge Zatko, a well-known white-hat hacker who served for a time as Twitter's chief of security before being dismissed in January by Twitter's CEO, had filed a whistleblower report against his former employer, The Washington Post reports. The complaint, which Zatko filed with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the Department of Justice, and the Federal Trade Commission, alleges, according to the Post, quote, that Twitter violated the term of an 11-year-old settlement with the Federal Trade Commission by falsely claiming that it had a solid security plan. Zatko's complaint alleges he had warned colleagues that half of the company's servers were running out-of-date and vulnerable software, and that executives withheld dire facts about the number of breaches and lack of protection for user data, instead presenting directors with rosy charts measuring unimportant changes. End quote. For its part, Twitter says it investigated Zatko's claim at the time he made them and found them without merit. The governments of Poland and Ukraine have concluded a memorandum of understanding concerning cybersecurity, formalizing cooperation in the fifth domain. Ukraine's SSSCIP describes the purpose of the agreement as organization of joint efforts for, quote, repelling the enemy in cyberspace, end quote. The statement adds, quote, the memorandum aims to strengthen the joint fight against crimes in the digital space, as well as to share experience and detailed information about cyber incidents, faster and more effectively, end quote. The Greek natural gas provider DEFSA disclosed over the weekend that it had been the victim of a ransomware attack. Quote, DESFA suffered a cyber attack on part of its IT infrastructure by cybercriminals that have tried to gain illegal access to electronic data, with a confirmed impact of the availability of some systems and possible leakage of a number of directories and files, end quote. BleepingComputer connects the incident with Ragnar Locker, a pioneer of double extortion attacks that both steal and encrypt data. Ragnar Locker, which claimed responsibility and leaked proof of compromised data Friday, is a gang long believed to be based in Russia. An attack on a European natural gas distributor during Russia's war against Ukraine is consistent with privateering aligned with Moscow's interests. The record reports that DEFSA has quite properly refused to negotiate with its attackers. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, also known as CISA, and the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center yesterday updated Alert AA22-228A, threat actors exploiting multiple CVEs against Zimbra's collaboration suite, to include 2 new detection signatures. Exploitation of Zimbra remains a threat, so the alert is worth a look. CISA especially urges organizations that may not have checked their systems for vulnerability to look for evidence of 5 vulnerabilities. Patches are available for all of them. CISA has also added CVE-2022-0028, a vulnerability in Palo Alto Network's PAN-OS, to its catalog of known exploited vulnerabilities. It's a, quote, reflected amplification denial of service vulnerability, end quote. Filtering policy misconfiguration could permit, quote, a network-based attacker to conduct reflected and amplified TCP denial of service attacks, end quote. U.S. federal civilian executive branch agencies overseen by CISA have until September 12th to apply Palo Alto's update. And finally, in an update on the menace to operation security presented by selfies and social media, Ukraine's defense ministry has credited holiday photos taken by Russian tourists in occupied Crimea with providing valuable targeting information. The ministry tweeted, quote, maybe we're being too hard on Russian tourists. Sometimes they can be really helpful, like this man, taking a picture of Russian air defense positions near Yevpatoria in occupied Crimea. Thank you and keep up the good work, end quote. The picture shows a middle-aged guy in Speedos posing, evidently deliberately, in front of a Russian missile launcher. The Telegraph explains that such open sources are delivering targets to Ukrainian forces. Ukraine's defense minister is, we think, obviously trolling its Russian opposition. Overhead imagery provides much more timely and accurate target indicators than does any selfie by Ivan Spidotovich. That said, tourist, soldier, and bystander photos posted to social media have been an OPSEC headache for Russian forces since the invasion began, and have probably contributed more to an understanding of the Russian order of battle than to direct targeting. But still, if you must take a selfie while enjoying the sun and the fun, it's better if there's a SamTel in the background. Keep snapping, bros. If order of battle and pics of combat vehicles are your hobby, well, we hear that everyone needs one.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Recorded Future. Staying one step ahead of the rapidly evolving threat landscape requires a constant flow of daily intelligence. To stay up to date on everything happening in the world of cybersecurity, join over 50,000 other security professionals who subscribe to the Cyber Daily. With daily email updates on the latest cybersecurity news, top threat actors, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more, the Cyber Daily is the first thing security professionals check every morning. To learn more and subscribe for free, go to recordedfuture.com/cyber-daily. And we thank Recorded Future for sponsoring our show. In 1894, William Henry Merrill, Jr. founded the Underwriters Electrical Bureau, later known as the Electrical Bureau of the National Board of Fire Underwriters. For most of the organization's life, they were known by the name UL, Underwriters Laboratories, and their certification was the standard for safety in electrical products. These days, UL has updated their name and their brand to UL Solutions, expanded their mission to applied safety science, including cybersecurity. David Nosabar is product lead for UL's Safe Cyber platform.
We have, first of all, an increasing volume and sophistication of security attacks. And as part of these attacks, we see that connected devices are being one of the main attack vectors, with obviously supply chain components being part of that and representing a huge problem for their lack of security. So we can go along and ultimately talk about the targeted attacks targeting critical infrastructures, industrial and automotive players, as well as their suppliers. We see that about a quarter of organizations, 25%, have experienced a supply chain attack in the past year. And ultimately, this is a testament to the fact that hackers are finding more and more ways to exploit those attack vectors and ultimately cause great harm to businesses and even individuals. And now, the second thing we need to talk about is why this is happening. And one of the key reasons is the lack of expertise, security expertise in most companies to prevent and fix these issues related to security. And the thing is, this is due to security having been relegated at the back of the queue over speed to market when we look at connected device manufacturers that were looking at gaining market share and favoring innovation. And security had been considered as a costly element and ultimately hampering that speed to market. Well, that momentum, like I said, is shifting because of the great harm that's been happening with the attacks that we've been witnessing. And the third element to look at is governments and industry bodies waking up to this and seeing the damage that it's causing and finally starting to push regulations and policies to address device security. And the SolarWinds attack was pretty much a great wake-up call in that regard, right, in 2020. And with those three elements that we've quickly recapped, it's all about how we can democratize product security for every connected device stakeholders so that they can essentially play ball and implement the right security measures to essentially mitigate those threats and risks. They have to strike the right balance with speed to market and security along with compliance, since we have regulations being enforced, such as if we can mention the executive order from the U.S. government and President Biden in May 2021, ultimately imposing device manufacturers and suppliers to come up with a software bill of materials and encouraging supply chain transparency. How can those connected device stakeholders make sure they are having the right information while also having the means to implement what's needed? This is where Safe Cyber comes into play. Safe Cyber is a security and compliance posture management platform for product security and development teams that are working at those device manufacturers, OEMs, suppliers, and system integrators. Safe Cyber is essentially hosting a suite of digitally enabled solutions, applications per se. This is representing the gateway to UL's product security expertise and aiming at democratizing connected device security. So we have for now two solutions on the platform that are Maturity Path and Binary Check. Maturity Path is more focused on the product security processes and governance side of things, helping organizations assess that, while Binary Check is more on the product security testing side of things and available in a self-service capacity for these organizations.
Well, help me understand, I think like a lot of folks, I certainly have a long history with UL and, growing up and seeing the UL logo on consumer products and so on. Is this part of the for-profit side of UL?
So that's correct. So let me provide a bit more background as to why UL Solutions is tackling security in addition to safety. And there's actually a simple reason for that, because today there's no safety without security. And this is pretty much put in full display when we look at, for example, a connected car today with a lot of software components and essentially having computer on wheels, so to speak. If we are finding security risks at the car level, this could actually impact the safety of its passengers, right? So at the end of the day, for UL, it's quite a natural element to tackle to ensure the overall safety of citizens and people at large, right? And make the world a safer place. And ultimately, UL Solutions has been having an extensive expertise in cybersecurity and device security with a global network of IoT and OT security labs across the world, along with a roster of security experts and advisors that are specialized in securing several ecosystems, right? Not only talking about ICS and industrial manufacturers, but also automotive, healthcare, the connected home and consumer electronics at large, as well as smart buildings and payments.
That's David Nosabor from UL Solutions. And now, a word from our sponsor, Axonius. Too many cybersecurity assets and SaaS apps, not enough visibility? Enter Axonius. The Axonius solution correlates asset data from existing solutions to provide an always up-to-date inventory, uncover gaps, and automate action, giving IT and security teams the confidence to control complexity. Visit axonius.com/cyberwire to learn more and try it free. That's axonius.com/cyberwire. And we thank Axonius for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Johannes Ulrich. He is the Dean of Research at the SANS Technology Institute and also the host of the ISC Stormcast podcast. Johannes, always great to welcome you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
So, interesting topic that you have been looking into here, looking at some vulnerabilities and sort of contrasting between control planes and data planes. What's going on here?
Yeah, that's actually a distinction that the reader of our diaries reminded me of. And if you're looking at your network security devices, routers and such, you should distinguish between control plane and data plane. Data plane is sort of what you basically consider what goes through the device. So your packets that are being passed along. Control plane is usually where you find the security vulnerabilities. That's like your web-based admin interface. And if you ever listen to me, I get sick of saying it, well, block access to that admin interface. That's sort of one of the common issues here. But lately we have seen some interesting issues with the data plane, which is much more difficult to control. Because that's, after all, sort of considered a little bit transparent. And historically, I think people haven't really paid much attention there because the data plane is conceptually pretty simple. You get the packet, you look at some headers and you pass it on or you block it. But it turns out that, well, as many things, once you look deeper into it, it's not quite as simple. And for example, there are these application layer gateways. What they are doing is they're doing very complex operations on packets on the application layer.
Let's dig into that. Help me understand what's going on here.
Yeah, so let's look at a recent example here. And this was sort of this Realtek vulnerability that affected their SIP, so their voice over IP application layer gateway. These gateways, they do have to do NAT. They do have to rewrite IP addresses. For 99% of the packet, that's only affecting the headers. Your IP header and then checksums and such in UDP and TCP. But for protocols like SIP, you find that the IP address is also embedded in the payload. Now the device, your router, has to rewrite that payload, not just the headers. And that's where it gets complicated because those payloads are not really meant to be rewritten. They're fairly intriguing kind of protocols that are being used here. And that's essentially where they messed up. Plus, the other problem you have with the data plane is that speed matters. For the control plane, when you're connected to a web server, you may have noticed a lot of these small routers, the web service is a little bit sluggish, kind of, when you connect to it. And that's usually okay because you have like one user connecting to it and you only need to connect to it once a month. Hopefully you connect to it once a month to check if the firmware needs updating, but that's about it. On the data plane, with gigabit connections that people have now in their homes, speed matters. So developers are a little bit enticed to take some shortcuts here to keep things simple, not necessarily check all the little details. And that's exactly sort of what happened here with Realtek, where, well, if Realtek routers, these particular routers, use or look at SIP traffic, you have a very straightforward and easy to exploit buffer overflow just by them looking at it. So you don't even have to use this protocol. It's just the router receives a packet that is SIP. It sends it to this application layer gateway. Hey, does this need rewriting? Oh, there's a buffer overflow here. Let me execute the attacker's code.
So what's to be done here? I mean, what are your recommendations?
Well, that's the hard part. So definitely, keep those firmwares updated. But like in the Realtek case, you may not have an update. It's with routers sort of running end of life and such. You may not find an update for this particular vulnerability. The standard advice always, add a device before your router. Kind of add a firewall in front of the firewall to protect the firewall. You can see how we can sort of play that game, and
it's
of
firewalls
course
all the way down, right?
Yeah, and that's not really realistic, kind of for a home user necessarily. Disable features as much as possible is certainly something that you can consider. Like keep it simple. And lastly, in particular, if this is like, let's say, a cable DSL modem that your ISP provided, you may not even have sort of a lot of insight in the configuration. Just treat it as hostile. And then again, sort of firewall after firewall. Now you have your firewall behind the ISP's firewall to basically ignore what happens there. Yes, they can still cut you off. They can still do a denial of service. But at least you don't have that implant in your network that's controlled by an attacker.
All right. Well, good information. Johannes Ulrich, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Devo, whose cloud-native logging and security analytics platform is built to transform security operations for today and beyond. Visit devo.com to learn more.
And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technology. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Brandon Karpf, Eliana White, Brew Prakash, Liz Irvin, Rachel Gelfand, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Trey Hester, filling in for Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Hi, this is Jen Iben. I'm the senior producer and one of the founders here at the CyberWire. I'm really excited to share with you that our Women in Cybersecurity reception is returning this fall. We started the event back in 2014 to bring women working in the industry together. We all know there's a need to increase diversity in cybersecurity, and we wanted to find some ways to help connect those already in the industry and encourage more women to join our ranks. Is your company also passionate about empowering women to succeed in cybersecurity? I'd invite you to join us as a sponsor. We have limited sponsor spots available. Visit thecyberwire.com/WCS to find out more. And thanks for listening.